Well, happy New Year's and welcome to 2025 from Walnut Farm Bees. Wanted to do a short video with just actually some thoughts on honey. Um, no surprise, I like honey. I like lots of kinds of honey, use it in different ways. Um, it's often hard to pick what my favorite honey is. I like the fact that different seasons and different plants produce different flavors of honey, and how you use it can change how it tastes. Um, I like creamed honey on my toast, occasionally in coffee or tea or something like that. But honey has been talked about for a long time. In fact, we found honey that's been thousands of years old, and we all like the idea that honey can stay in good condition for long periods of time, and usually that has to do with um, how that honey was preserved. If air has gotten to it, if the moisture content is too high. For beekeepers who are extracting and bottling honey, often one of the concerns is what the moisture content is. Not that the honey will be completely bad, but it will often start to ferment if there's too much moisture in there. So that's the point at which I guess you could say honey could go bad. I want to address a few different things. First is this idea of you'll see on a label such as ours, pure or real honey. Um, Pure is really just a reference to the idea that it doesn't have anything other than honey. There's no fake sugars or syrups or things like that added to it. Prior to 2022, it was commonly thought that a lot of imported honey had been messed with, had something else added to it. And I tend to still think that that is largely the case. But in 2022, a new study showed of testing honey that only 10%, around 10% of imported honey was not pure. However, there was some more testing done in Europe, which was using a different type of test, which can more accurately detect whether something's been added. And in that testing in 23, it showed almost half of imported honey contained fillers like rice syrup and wheat syrup. And what we found, even through some investigations and research, is that the people who are adding things to honey have gotten very good at trying to add things and still have it show up as pure honey. So the best bet for you if you're thinking about buying honey is to be familiar with who you're buying from. Do they actually produce it? The second point is that of local honey. A lot of people are looking for local honey, and I also appreciate local honey. The idea behind it is that you're being exposed to the same kind of plants as the area in which you live, whether it's for allergy or some other health benefits, which some people are looking for, or just trying to stick with what's local to you. But the reality is that local doesn't have to be next door to you. It has to be the similar kind of plants. And often for a lot of us, this could be like an entire state or states nearby us would all be considered local honey because it's the same kind of plants that we're talking about. The third point I wanted to mention was that of raw honey. So we sell raw honey, as do a number of other places. And this has to do with how finely it was filtered and heated, or sometimes in other products we think of the heating process as being something like pasteurization. A high level of filtering versus just coarse straining for foreign materials results in some of the beneficial pollen and propolis being removed from the honey. So we only coarsely strain our honey so that it gets like bee parts and things out of the honey, but still the pollen and propolis pass through. That is what we consider to be raw honey. And also, if you have a very high heat applied, and I'm not talking warm temperatures like some of you may know, inside of a bee colony, it can be 90 degrees. So I'm not talking about honey that's been at 70, 80, 90 degrees. I'm talking about higher temperatures where commercial places will use this to get it through their fine filters, move it through their machinery, and try to produce a long-term shelf-stable product. And it can kill off some of the beneficial properties of the honey if it gets too warm. So that's what raw honey means. Fourth topic is that of crystallization. Most honey will eventually crystallize, and this doesn't harm your honey or the flavor of your honey. I know that a lot of people like squeezable liquid honey, and but crystallized honey, you can still take some kind of spoon or something and scoop out the honey and put it into your recipe, put it into your coffee, put it in your tea. It'll work just fine. There's also this myth that crystallization is what's determining real honey or raw honey from fake and processed honey, and that's not necessarily the case. For the most part, it's the nectar source or plants that determine how fast the honey will crystallize. And this greatly varies by geographic region and what's nearby you, what's in fact agriculture, things like that. So I'm generalizing for Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, a lot of the spring honeys contain more fructose than glucose, and a lot of the late summer or fall honeys contain more glucose than fructose. And so as a result of the nectar source, the glucose crystallizes more readily, more so than fructose. And that's what creates a honey that might more rapidly crystallize. I don't have any jars of fall honey sitting out here right in front of me at the moment, but it will crystallize a whole lot faster than the lighter spring honey that we have. Fifth thing is, I see this, seems like every year this comes around on the internet, this metal spoon myth, that you're going to kill off the beneficial honey ingredients by using metal on your honey. This is really based on a long time ago. The idea where we used other kinds of spoons and instruments that had different metals like copper, iron, and silver. Whereas most of the time these days we're using stainless steel, which does not harm your honey and is non-reactive. Sixth topic here today is organic honey. So no honey produced in the US can claim to be organic, period. You'll see it advertised, and it's just usually misinformed beekeepers or maybe even deceptive products or inexperienced beekeepers. You're not selling organic honey in the US. As of 2021, the USDA banned the labeling of US honey as organic. And in some ways it makes sense. It's difficult to determine where your bees traveled, how far they went, and what they foraged versus some other organic product. So if you see organic honey on a store shelf, it probably came from outside the US and was not certified as organic by the USDA, or it was mislabeled by someone in the US. And as far as what countries are these coming from, so largely we buy, if you look on your average store shelf and you actually can figure out where the honey came from, it's a mix of honey from different countries. Technically we don't buy it from China, but we know they funnel it through other countries because the largest honey producing countries in the world are first China, followed by Turkey. So the best approach for beekeepers and those for shopping for honey is to try to for beekeepers, put your bees in locations where there's likely to be organic forage and lack of nearby chemical spraying, or only collect honey at times of years in those locations where it's less likely to be impacted by anything non-organic, which is what we try to do. Every year we make more and more of a focus of that. Timing, we don't collect honey in certain areas, certain times of the summer or fall because of the likelihood that it could contain non-organic ingredients. 7, plastics and dangerous metals in honey. So this is recent. There's been studies that warn about the levels of both microplastics and dangerous metals like lead, cobalt, nickel, chromium, and arsenic in honey. In the recent study, metals were found in various areas in the U.S., including high levels of arsenic. I think it was Oregon and Washington State, high levels of lead in the Carolinas, Utah, and Louisiana. Now, I should note, I think this is probably going to be studied further. The microplastics were most commonly found in urban areas, but the levels of all this was below what was considered to be hazardous for both children and adults. So I'm sure this needs more study, more research, but something to keep your eye on and be aware of. 8, antibiotics and synthetic chemicals in honey. So there are some large commercial honey producers who frequently use antibiotics to prevent or to treat bacterial diseases. So that could be getting into your honey, as well as synthetic chemicals for pests and their colonies. Uh, know your beekeeper, know where you're getting your stuff. Not all bees and honey are treated this way. There are organic treatments that are also available, so it's something to be aware of, uh, and you'd be interested in as far as where you buy your honey. And it's also important to note that how and when someone collects their honey, like dedicated honey supers, dedicated frames for honey, as well as if they follow the best practices for removing any chemicals, like some beekeepers do not. And unfortunately, I regularly become aware of people who don't follow this, and certainly not something that I would do for honey that I was going to consume or sell to someone else. And then finally, in Pennsylvania, especially central Pennsylvania on south, something of concern in recent years has been lanternfly honeydew, which, if you are getting honey in central or southern PA that is late summer or even fall, often it's including lanternfly honeydew, which will give it kind of an off or a different flavor. Not that it's dangerous, but just something to note. So we don't collect late summer or fall honey in southern PA, only in northern PA for that reason. Um, Again, not that it's dangerous, but technically it's coming from the droppings of lanternflies, which bees are collecting, and it does give it a little bit of an off flavor. Some people like it, some people hate it. At any rate, I hope you have a wonderful 2025. If you're a beekeeper, that you enjoy and have a great beekeeping season and enjoy the honey that you produce. If you're just a honey lover, be aware of where you're buying and what you're buying as far as the products, and continue to enjoy all the deliciousness and wonderful benefits of honey.